Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are having other guests join us now for the conversation on the new national minimum wage. With us here in the Abuja studios, we'd like to welcome Mr. Timothy Olawale. He's Director General, Nigerian Employers Consultative Association. That's NECA. Mr. Olawale, pleasure to have you with us in our Abuja studios.
Good morning.
All right.
Thank you.
And then also here is Dr. Emeka Okengo. It's a familiar guest on Good Morning Nigeria. He's an economist. Dr. Okengo, pleasure to have you with us.
An honor to be here. Good morning, Nigeria.
And from Lagos, we've been joined by the Vice President, one of the Vice Presidents of the NLC, that's Amechi Asuguni. I hope I got that pronunciation right, Asuguni. That's Vice President, NLC. Pleasure to have you with us on the program.
We just hope you can hear us clearly in Lagos there, because we would like to kickstart this conversation with you. I want to believe that you listened to the Minister of Labour and Employment a short while ago and had all his explanations with respect to the new minimum wage. Now, let's get your take on this. Now the figures are there. 30,000 naira, Labour says, then Governor's 22.5, and the federal government is saying 24. Now, what, in your opinion, should be the right way of addressing these conflicting figures with respect to arriving at a minimum wage that will be very impactful generally on the economy?
First, I will say good morning to you all. Secondly, is expression of probably a bit regret of the absence of the minister, because from my understanding, he must have departed the studio. But he tried as much as he could to give his own opinion. But the fact of a negotiation process is you don't add, neither would you remove. The procedure started like a tripartite negotiation could commence. And I give it to the committee. They tried their best to actually achieve that report in August, which actually did not succeed. We made a critical effort to see how we conclude that meeting by September. That also, the government, as you can see, have also caused to delay into November. So unfortunate, but given the figures he was referring to be candid, I thank God I have the OPS representatives with you. The question there is a process of negotiation is about give and take. And I understand and I remember clearly that Labour actually asked for 66,500, and then OPS at a point, they were also at 25,000 naira. At that time, government also was at 20,700. It was a process from these three bodies. But a time came in the negotiation, Labour also dropped to 45. OPS insisted on their 25,000. At that time, federal government was also talking about 24,000. And it was that time that a member of the committee actually moved a motion or a proposal that, looking at the positions of these tripartite bodies, saying 45, 25, 24, that he would recommend in order for us to close the meeting that day, because that was the last meeting day to finalize the minimum wage. And a motion was moved that a proposal rather was made before the committee that 30,000 may be a meeting point to be adopted by the committee if he so wishes. It was at that point that Labour actually took excuse to consult, and that consultation took long. It took long because 30,000 was never the intention of Labour to agree for their members. But looking at the distance of 8 months negotiation, you know, our people give parable in my village that if you are looking for rope to actually tie your firewood, and you look for rope for 3 years, the community will ask you, what are you tying? So based on those principles, we say, why not just agree with the 30,000 and then try to market it to our members? After all, the issue of give and take, the issue of ability to pay, the issue of cost of living, other evidence-based approach. We look into this fact, and then we came into the hall, addressed the committee, and then second the opinion that this 30,000 be adopted. And OPS in that regard also supported to achieve that 30,000. Other government representatives, they were comfortable with the 30,000. A motion was moved to adopt the 30,000, and then a motion was seconded in that same regard until the meeting was adjourned. I remember a motion was moved for adjournment of the meeting thereafter. And then later on, we heard the minister addressing the public to say the meeting was inconclusive. That was where the drama started. And the issue of governors coming up with a figure of 22,500 is belated, because that would have served as their proposal. When we did the public hearing, all the states submitted memorandum. At least I remember clearly 21 states submitted memorandum, and they did so with figures. Some did not add figures. Some say whatever we agree, they will pay. So the issue of Governors Forum, which we regard as a non-legitimate body, coming to hide under the carpet of a forum to make a proposal after negotiation has been concluded, is neither here nor there, because committee have concluded their job. All these backyard analysis they are doing is actually not going to help the process, because to us as labor, and I believe even the organized private sector with the integrity intact, I believe the negotiation has been concluded. So all the fact that minister has expressed, they are just trying to see if there is a way out to amend a process that has been concluded, which I think is going to be difficult to achieve.
All right, Amechi Asuguni, thank you very much. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's now hear from the Director General of NECA, that's the Employers Consultative Association that also participated in the negotiations along with other members of the organized private sector. Mr. Olawale.
Good morning again. It is true that I was deeply involved all through the process of negotiation at the tripartite committee. And you know, there is one basic principle about negotiation. And that principle, as already enunciated by the minister, I totally agree with that, the issue of principle of affordability and sustainability, which was stressed over and over by the OPS, that's the organized private sector. The second principle, also in negotiation, is that if you want to achieve results, considering your own position and arguments, you have to also look objectively at the other party's position. The third principle, which is also very important, is that in negotiation, you are not fixed in your position permanently. Negotiation is about giving and receiving back, give and take. And that was exactly what transpired in the course of this negotiation. The organized private sector's position from day one had been 25,000 naira. And we kept insisting anything above 25,000 naira was not acceptable. That is one. Secondly, it is also true that in the course of the negotiation on the last day, and that was after the warning strike, which, by the way, was very devastating on organized businesses. Those few days, the losses recorded by organized businesses were colossal. In other words, we suffered for what we never caused in the first instance. We said this 4th and 5th day of October, we must close this deal and move on. On that day, especially the last day, which was the 5th, we had a stalemate. Government made a proposal in the morning of 20,700. The OPS was still fixed at its 25,000 naira. Labor dropped down from its initial 65,000 or thereabouts position to 45,000 naira. And they refused to move a bit, an inch from that position. Now, you know, I've already listed the basic principles guiding negotiation. And for us to make progress, for us to avoid a crisis situation, which, by the way, is also looming on the 6th of November now, for us to also consider the positions of all the parties involved and arrive at the midpoint. That was where the issue of where can we conveniently fix as a midpoint that will at least be a win-win situation for all the parties. And that was when we prevailed on Labour to move from that fixed position of 45,000 naira downward. Initially, they resisted, saying that, in fact, their constituency will roast them alive because they do not have the mandate to go down below that 45. But because of our arguments, explanations, pressure on them, they said we should make a proposal. And we felt the midpoint could be 30,000 naira, which, by the way, was also above the mandate that organized private sector had been working with. And that was how we arrived at 30,000 naira. They consulted, they reluctantly acceded to that 30,000 naira. And now, where the crux of the matter lies was the Honorable Minister's insistence, in fairness to him. He kept insisting that even 30,000 naira was not acceptable to federal government, was not sustainable, not affordable. And he kept insisting, even up to the last point, that what government would be able to do was 24,000 naira. And we did conclude on the note that plenary adopted 30,000 naira. However, because majority will always have their way, while minority will have their say, that, however, it should be reflected in our report that the position of government was 24,000 naira. And that was on the note that we closed.
Okay, we will return to you if we have time to do that for further explanations, on this matter, because from the private sector, you are for 30,000 naira, and of course we know the difference, the different 25,000 naira. No, he said 30.
25,000 naira.
But later,
however,
30.
In the spirit of give and take, we agreed to 30,000 naira at plenary.
And from what the minister told us a short while ago, there are some of the members who don't even pay the 18,000 naira currently, well, the minimum wage.
To the best of my knowledge, in the organized private sector,
okay,
we are even paying way higher
okay,
than even the 30,000 naira we are talking about today.
All right, to Dr. Emeka Okengu now, let's look at the economic perspective of the entire package. Kingsley did ask the minister about the consequential impact of any increase in minimum wage, considering other factors, that will, of course, play in if the figure is reached at. In your own consideration, what should be the effect of this if it happens, considering the figures in question being debated?
Well, I think the word minimum doesn't sit well with me. I think what we should be talking about are right wages. Because when you start talking about right wages, you now begin to now talk about how did we all get about what is minimum and what is right. Okay? I was waiting for labor or government or organized private sector to have brought out some kind of concept notes to say we're predicating our arguments on this. Okay? Now, we think that because of the workforce is 120,000%, and we are earning X amount from this and that, we are able to do X, Y, Z. Right? As what you call right wages. But let me tell you what I think is going on here. If you listen to the organized private sector, you listen to the labor, you listen to government, it's all about grandstanding. And in this grandstanding, people are not taking into effect what my brother had mentioned about the losses. he talked about the losses to labor, to organized private sector. But he hasn't talked about the losses to the unorganized private sector, which actually now bear the bigger brunt of this. You see labor coming out to say, go and stock up your house with food. Go and stock up for a very long, period of a strike, indefinite. But there are people who we need to step out of their homes to be able to feed their families, and they are in the millions. Now, the governors now, if you watch them, it garred me so much. Okay, because after that, there was a lot of backslapping, and then you are talking about paying people, you can be able to do 25,500. And these are people who are riding in convoys of 30, 40 luxury cars, and are saying to you, we cannot pay. But nobody has been able to put some sense in all this confusion to be able to say, why wouldn't Zamfara, that lost over $8 billion, according to statistics from the Federal Ministry of Finance, in illegal gold mining, be talking about not being able to pay workers? Why wouldn't Yobe, which has 900 million metric tons of bentonic clay, which is a very major ingredient of drilling mud, not be able to pay workers? Why wouldn't Kaduna, which has gotten a platinum, not be able to pay workers? Why wouldn't Imo, that has lignite? Why wouldn't Anambra, that has clay? Okay, so nobody is able to put this thing into proper context. What you have is, you have people who now sit and say, oh, I'm representing the organized private sector, I'm representing the labor, I'm representing the Nigerian worker. If you are representing the Nigerian worker, I think that what we should be talking about is there a framework that's able to say that the right wage will be a wage, okay, that allows the worker to be able to be at his desk, using what you call public transportation that is functional, that allows the worker to be able to pay his children's school fees, using what you call, the public sector education system, that allows the man to be able to get good medicals, using what you call the public medical systems. If we're able to say, okay, fine, this is the input coming into our country. Are you listening to me, Kiran? Because this is where the issues are. Because on the 6th, what are we going to be having? It's been happening all in and all out. Nigerians are going to be dying in their millions because they're going to be shutting down hospitals. People can't do their bankings. People can't go to hospitals. People can't do their businesses. Now, and they wake up and say, okay, we've reached a compromise. And nobody's asking labor, how did you get to this compromise? The organized private sector they are talking about are stifling. Look at the reports. Over 60% of them are closed down. They can't operate because of a high cost of forex. This is a fact. You don't even have these people being supported by any indigenous technologies here. It's also a fact. So when you tell a man, who is the organized private sector, for crying out aloud? Is it the man who is importing already made products from China and then is adding value to it? Is it the man who is importing resin or propylene to be able to make buckets? Is it the man who is importing fabrics from Pakistan? Is it the man who is importing machinery from China? So until we're able to please look at the heart of this thing, and what is the heart of these things, it's important we know that we don't even know where these figures are coming from. What is it predicated upon? The demand for 66,000 from labor. And they are now going back to say, oh, because you, and let me tell you why I use the word grandstanding. The last announcement by labor is, because you people dared to even begin to question, we are no longer at 30,000, we are back to 66,000. This as of yesterday. So what are we really talking about here?
All right, Emeka Okengu, thank you very much for your position. Just hold on a second. We would like to take some tweets now, Kirian.
Yes.
Very briefly, but return to Lagos to ask NLC to respond to some of the points that have been articulated. Engineer Idara Udo has this tweet: minimum wage is very necessary. I'm not yet married. I work with the federal government. You didn't say where exactly you work at the federal establishment. Now, the way my salary escapes from my account, sometimes I sit down and cry with the thought, am I working or suffering?
All right, from Ahmed Ibrahim Idris, perhaps the issue of unemployment is conflicting and is the most difficult problem which the NLC and the government failed. About 75% of Nigerian graduates unemployed. But does Nigeria have the resources? This question goes to the Minister of Labour. Of course, the Minister of Labour has left us.
All right, Goro has this tweet. How much does 30,000 per month translate to? Another 100 billion naira for federal government, and how much for the states? Push it to subsidize fuel pump price. Let's buy it at 100 naira per litre. It is better than our current demand.
All right, now, this is from Delejak Solomon. Yes. He says, the truth must be told. You can't give what you don't have. The current economic fundamentals do not favor to continue to keep the current 18,000 naira minimum wage approved since 2010. The federal government should cut down the costs of governance and continue to diversify the economy as a means of payment.
All right, let's return to Mr. Abechi Asugene, Vice President of NLC, with us in Lagos. You listened to the comments of the other two guests, of course, Olawale of NECA restating the transactions at the tripartite committee negotiations, and Emeka Okengo raising some very important questions, some of which we had also asked the Minister of Labour and Employment. I would like you to respond to those questions. Namely, what were the factors that the NLC considered in making a demand first for 66,500 and then coming to a figure less than half of that, which is 30,000? What is it that Labour was thinking about? And two, what is on Labour's appreciation of the consequential effect of fixing a new minimum wage at whatever figure is eventually agreed?
Okay, I think your first question, talking about where we were and where we are. As a matter of fact, thank God the analysis made by my senior colleague, by the grace of God, I also have my BSc in economics, but he's a doctor, I gave it to him. He made analysis with due respect to his submission. I want to believe that the principle of give and take, like my brother from NECA actually illustrated in the beginning. And again, in economics, when we say all things being equal, and again, we also say, can all things be equal? The initial proposal was made at that level, looking into consideration that the minimum wage was long overdue for review, looking at the consequences we are already suffering, the hardship Nigerians workers are facing following the wrong policies. Example, the removal of fuel subsidy, the increase of fuel from 97 to 145, and the federal government promised that they have already outlined 500 billion to cushion the effect on Nigerians, including workers. Eventually, that failed because I was in that technical committee. We sat for 1 year without recommendation. And then the only recommendation was that they are going to cushion the effect on workers through the improvement on wage. That was what gave birth to the idea to immediately commence negotiation to actually boost the salary so that workers can at least withstand the market challenges. So the fact is, while we are on 66, believing that our argument could give us that fact, because 66,500 naira was not also too much for Nigeria. Looking at the basis, looking at the values we have, I thank God he illustrated picking some states randomly. He made some key relevant expo to people so that we will know what are we talking about. The inability that is being advertised by governors. Are they talking about inability of a governor or of a state? Because from what I'm seeing, the states have the capacity to pay more than 30,000. The state have capacity to generate resources. But the people elected to drive the state, they are suffering from that knowledge improvement. And therefore, they can't think more than they are. And they, like they say, you can't give more than you have. You can't give what you don't have. So the problem here is not about the demand of 66 back to 30. That is to say, government should appreciate labor. Going less than half of what we actually proposed initially shows you that we are considering the principle of ability to pay. Because the ability to pay principle is looking at the index. What can state afford? And if anybody tells me about ability to pay, who has also asked himself, ability to live on 24,000 as a Nigerian worker, where would the person live? Which vehicle would the person board to work? Is the person entitled to children or not? Because there are fundamental rights of citizens of this country that are also incorporated in that wage. The facilities that are supposed to be provided by federal government, so that the little wage, even the 25,000 or 30,000, could help a worker. The medical system, for example, where do we have free medical care for a Nigerian worker? The movement to work, prices of transportation has gone up. This is a country that average Nigerian must have generator. How can a 24-earning worker afford a generator? Do you know that every 5 meters in this country, you have a borehole? Every worker is now charged to sink borehole for themselves. Ordinarily, when you travel to advanced countries, you don't see any of such. Water is free. And when you are paying for utility bill, they already planned those salaries with those conditions, knowing fully well that we have provided road for you, we have provided transportation for you, we are giving you water, we are giving you medical system, we have made all the available basic facility for you. Therefore, salary can be on this just for your children. But this is a place whereby...
Comrade Amechi, we thank you so much. For want of time, we would like other guests also make their own contributions. But I think the question that Kingsley actually put to you, he was trying to find out the parameters that you considered before arriving at a particular amount of money, taking into consideration the ripple effect of increase in minimum wage. Well, you've already told us now that how things have risen in the market. Of course, if you increase it, the market people will also increase, the transport people will increase their fare too. So that's a multiplier effect, when these things happen. But let's return to Abuja here now, where Timothy Olaole will, of course, address some of the issues you raised.
Thank you very much. I will start on the note of just a brief comment on what Dr. Okengu said initially with regards to the basis for arriving at figures that were canvassed or that have been banded. My first comment or reaction would be that ordinarily you don't expect that 30 resourceful people will be in a room to discuss and negotiate on this matter without actually considering empirical data to arrive at whatever conclusions they are eventually going to present to government. Besides, every stakeholder coming with his own data, information to support his argument. We also have professionals. We had MBS. We had several other bodies, even in government and even in the private sector. We had CIPM, we had NISA, and so on and so forth, also coming with empirical data and information. So ordinarily, you don't expect that we'll just sit there and just start banding figure without actually looking at details, economic analysis, and so on and so forth. And with regards to labor, in fairness to them, when they initially presented their 66,500, I might not recollect all the arguments now, they came with a very robust argument to justify that. Looking at inflationary trend from 2011, when we had the last minimum wage, between then and now, looking at depreciation of our currency between then and now, and so on and so forth. So they actually had arguments. But even at that, other parties also had their own arguments, especially the organized private sector that I represent, for instance. All those other indices affected us as well. Businesses, like Dr. Okengu has said, are not thriving well. We've had closures, we've had to even cut down on workers, numbers of workers, and so on and so forth. And these were considerations, even profitability, which are dwindled. These are considerations that were tabled, that moved the House to say, okay, while you have justification for your 66,500, it's not sustainable. We should have a midpoint that will at least be workable to everybody. And there is also the issue of morality. In other words, what can actually sustain an individual, which was what was put to the state governments. That look, if you are talking of 30,000 naira, it's just basic minimum that we are talking about. And that is considering the fact that majority of workers are not on that minimum wage. Majority are on higher levels of pay in the system. So basically, those are indices and parameters that were used to arrive at the...
All right, Mr. Olawale, thank you very much. Dr. Okengo, just before we have a torrent of tweets that have come in, we hope we're able to take most of them before we call it a day on today's edition of the program. But Dr. Okengo, can we make a projection, for instance, as to the likely macroeconomic impact of a new national minimum wage, considering where we are coming from? We're just out of a recession, and we know the constitutive factors in that recession. Yes. And here we are. We also know how we can model in Nigeria's reactions with regard to, you increase the pump price of petrol, you see what happens. Transporters, landlords, everybody, market women, and so on and so forth. So can we take a look at, for instance, and say this is the likely impact, considering also, as the minister admitted, that there will be consequences for pension liabilities going forward. And then across the board, the implications once you already have a new national minimum wage.
I can tell you one thing that will happen very, very quickly. You're going to have another loss of maybe 10 million jobs. You already have 6 million lost. You're going to have crime spiraling out of control. You're going to have every allied vice coming into the mix. Now, my brother Tim had said something very interesting. What I had expected him to have also said is that when those data came, that there was a small technical working group that developed what we call a concept, okay, that will now be shared amongst the people for advice. So that when you now have developed these concepts, probably now taking into consideration labor's position, their own position, government's position, and then we'll now have what we'll call a meeting development point to be able to say, okay, we have already lost 10 million people. We are going to lose more. This is very consequential. Okay? 2, we have already lost, we are coming out of, please, and I don't want to use the word recession because we don't even qualify to get into a recession. A recession is a production-driven situation. What you can do is to get into a depression. And you get into a depression when you lose your creditworthiness. It can take another hour to explain this. So please stop using the term recession.
Yeah, because Emeka, you remember we always had you on the program along with the other guests. We were always talking about this point.
Yes.
But the other guests also disagreed with you.
Yes, and I keep saying that any day the price of, please Nigerians, I'm saying this and hold me against it. If the price of your oil dips by $10, $15, you are going to enter into another so-called recession. What it is that we lose our creditworthiness and people stop doing business with us. And they say we have gotten into recession.
All right.
We can't even get into one. If we're in a recession, then we are lucky.
Okay, Emeka, thank you so much. You know, when such explanations are coming from economists, of course, we need a serious lecture to digest and dissect it properly. Now, we have a litany of tweets here. Kinsley, let's know what we can do.
Yes, let's just rush through them. I think Festus
Akimboyewa, yes. Festus Akimboyewa says governors should stop treating workers with contempt. Even with 30,000 naira minimum wage, workers will still struggle to live, and we have to find a way to survive after paying rent, transport, and other bills. Workers will be justified to go on strike so they can live and not just survive. All
right. Patience Tomo tweets, now will the minimum wage cut across every grade level? If so, it means that those already earning big salaries will have an increment. How feasible is that when states can't even pay 18,000 naira? Only an industrialized nation, not a consuming one, can be talking about increasing minimum wage right now.
Baba Ishaka Zana, the question of ability to pay shouldn't be the issue because the states are not paying the current minimum wage, not because they are not able, but because they don't want to.
Sonny Michael Makoje, common economic sense makes us understand that the value of money is what money can buy. As at 2011, when the minimum wage was reviewed, the value of the naira to a dollar was 150. Today, $1 to 1 naira is as high as 362. Government should be fair. All right.
All right. I think he continued.
Yeah, well, it's a bit long. So that we can take
exactly. Okay.
Yes.
Aminu Mustafa, the minister should please tell us how can Nigerian workers make up the high unexpected inflation that happened, cutting down their salaries or wages by almost 50% if the national minimum wage is updated.
All right, Chris Simeon has this tweet. Concerning the new minimum wage, NLC should bear with the federal government until when things are normalized, probably after the general elections next year.
All right, so let's not take Baba again. We've taken him before.
Right.
Let's take Quadri or Lajide. If you put political appointments on salary grade level, I bet salaries will be reviewed every year.
And this is from Usman Bani Kanto. The truth of the matter is that the governors are sincere to civil servants. They were part and parcel of the negotiations. They have no reason to recant again, in as much as they have the money to engage the so-called political aides in their thousands.
All right, let's take Suleiman Zuntu. Labor laws and the ILO constitution stipulate that the common law rules, when applied, will subject the employee to a condition of subordination, unless all stakeholders under labor will be considered privy to employees' contract of employment. It remains a difficult task.
Now, James Odaudu tweets. Now, all the governors need to do is to reassess what their political appointees earn in their states. A special advisor to a governor earns more than a director in the civil service. Secondly, what governors appropriate to themselves in the name of security votes should be channeled to this cause.
Now, finally, Suleiman Yahya, federal government workers should get even more than 30,000 naira, considering the expensiveness of Abuja. What about harmonizing all the federal government workers' salaries? Because I don't see no reason why someone working in NMPC taking salary more than someone in other government organizations who perhaps work more hours.
All right, Kirian, it's on that note, and to our viewers as well, we'd like to appreciate you for tuning in and then, of course, for sending in your comments. This is an ongoing issue. We'd like to appreciate all the guests who have been with us. The minister we already signed off earlier. Amechi Asugine, Vice President, NLC, joining us from Lagos. Thank you very much for being part of our discussion this morning. And then with us here in the studios, always a delight having Dr. Emeka Okengu, an economist. Emeka Okengu, thanks a lot for being around.
It's a privilege to be here, thank you.
We also would like to thank the DG of NECA, that's Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, Mr. Timothy Olawale. Thank you for being with us on the program.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, so we're pressed for time, and the only segment we can take now is just to look at the weather prospects for the rest of today.
A warm welcome to the weather forecast from the Nigerian